Hi, it's Jeff Chalmers from discoverdouble-bass.com, where you can go to learn all about the double bass with our courses, our lessons, and our interviews with many of the world's greatest bass players. And today I'm joined by a wonderful artist, the principal bass player of the Queensland Symphony Orchestra, also a teacher at the University of Queensland and the Queensland Conservatorium of Music. So it gives me great pleasure to welcome Phoebe Russell. Great to see you, Phoebe.
Hey Jeff, thanks so much for having me here. It's a real pleasure to be part of the Discover Double Bass family.
Well, it's just been fantastic to meet you in person, to hear you play, and also to hear you teach left-hand technique, because you've just got such a great approach. I wonder if we could maybe start the conversation by looking at what is it in left-hand technique that you're aspiring towards in your own playing and also for your students?
Yeah, so a lot of my playing revolves around playing with a really legato and connected sound for solo playing, but I think a lot of my approach is about making the double bass easier to play. Yeah. When people see the double bass, they often think, oh, it's such a big instrument, it's going to be so much work to play, and of course there's an element of that. But a lot of what I teach is how to make sure that you've got the stamina to get through a big concert, how to make sure that you're working with the natural arm weight of the left hand and focusing on block positioning so that you've got a really clear map of the instrument in your left hand and you don't have to, tire yourself out needlessly.
Well, let's maybe unpack those a bit. So in terms of posture, one of the things that is obvious is that you're standing up. So are you playing standing all the time? Is it only for solo work and for teaching, or do you play seated at all?
Yeah, so I spend most of my practice time, probably all of my practice time standing. I stand for all of my solo playing. When I can get away with it, I stand for chamber music. But in orchestra, I tend to sit, obviously, because everyone else is sitting. But I feel that actually sitting it's a lot easier to play in the lower registers of the instrument. And when I stand, I do it more so that I have freedom to move around, which is something that you need more in solo playing.
Because I think one of the things that I found with students of the double bass is occasionally issues with posture will kind of cause people to be playing maybe with the bass too vertical, maybe struggling to use arm weights. I wonder if it's a very common issue. I wonder if you could maybe speak a little bit about that, because you play so comfortably standing. Yeah,
so I feel like a lot of the way I play is so that I'm playing around the instrument and it's not controlling me. So a lot of the time I think a lot about the bass kind of leaning against me naturally, and making sure that I'm able to hold the bass up without using my left hand at all. So it kind of just stays there. Then I think about moving around the instrument. So I'm controlling the bass, it's not controlling me. That's the main motto.
And you move really comfortably in and out of thumb position. That's another thing. I wonder if there's any tips about that transition area and about moving. Maybe you were playing a Bottesini melody earlier that moves in and out of thumb position.
So I think the main thing for me transitioning into thumb position is making sure that you're not stretching down the instrument and leading with the fingers. Rather, we're thinking about actually bringing our arm weight around and maintaining that really open hand shape and open chest to keep the weight channeling through the fingerboard, rather than relying just on the individual fingers to hold down the string.
I know you play. I noticed another one of the really common questions is about using clasped fingers at all, and you speak a little bit about that in your course. Maybe you could just kind of explain when might be appropriate to play that way and when you might not wish to.
So I had a pretty big problem with playing with collapsed fingers when I first started studying, and pretty much I'd say until I was about 21, so I was kind of almost at the tail end of my studies, and I decided that I probably couldn't go any further with my playing unless I really addressed that. So I find it very important to have a really strong, solid, open hand position in all areas of the double bass. But then having said that, I think there are moments where you can be a bit more flexible with that. So when we're playing something like, for example, the opening of the Kusevitsky, like to get a really thick vibrato and a really kind of passionate, indulgent sound, it sometimes actually helps to play with a bit more flesh of the finger on the string.
Yeah, you get such a striking opening. Would you mind playing that passage?
Oh, I'll give it a go.
Wow, so you're really getting a rich, expressive tone, and the vibrato is really heavy as well, it feels like.
Yeah, so like I said, it's so important to be able to play with a really solid foundation.
Yes.
And I teach all of my students that to start with. But then having that flexibility, I find just really helps with the notes that you want to play a little bit, juicier or more passionately. Actually, I played a fair bit with Sol Gabetta, the cellist, at the beginning of my studies. Obviously, I was in the orchestra, she was the soloist. And I was so inspired by her playing, and I noticed that she really develops notes by experimenting with which part of the finger she uses. So I kind of thought, if she can do it, then surely I'm allowed to.
Absolutely. And just before we move on to talking about block positioning, there was something we discussed briefly off camera, which is it looks at times in the lower position that you're using your third finger and you're actually using your second, but it's incredibly close to your third. Your third finger is down, or is not down, sorry, but it's incredibly, like when you were playing the arpeggios there at the bottom of the Kusavisky passage, as you were starting to ascend. Yeah, that's right. It's almost like you're supporting in some way, but sometimes it looks like you're playing 1-3-4, not 1-2-4, but...
That's true. Actually, I got this habit probably from one of my teachers. He said to me, you get all the weight that you possibly can to the string, stacks on with the fingers. And I think that I sometimes do, for example, even if I'm playing on the first finger, to get a really rich, this is for the really romantic repertoire, to get a really rich sound, I probably subconsciously put the fingers on top, and then same thing.
Yeah, it's there was just the odd moment where I was thinking, especially the arpeggiated passages going up and down.
It's funny, not many people ever mention that to me, but it's something that I do, and like using the flat of the finger and then kind of stacking the other finger on top just means that you can get a really kind of almost ridiculous vibrato on the bottom notes.
Yeah, I definitely think in the lower register, that slow, heavy, wide vibrato can sound so expressive. Okay, a couple of other quick questions. The next one was, you talk in your course about block positioning, and you seem to have a really clear map of the fingerboard. And I wonder if you could just briefly explain the concept and how that informs how you will learn a piece and perform it.
Yeah, so map is exactly the word that I use a lot. So for me, that means basically shifting to block hand shapes rather than shifting to individual notes. That's the main thing. So a lot of the exercises that I've written that you'll find in my course are written around having that sort of block hand shape in all areas of the double bass. So you've always got a clear fingering pattern when you come to learn a piece. And generally there are certain notes that I use a certain finger on, and it just means that it takes the guesswork out of intonation. If I'm shifting, for example, to a B flat, I'm shifting and putting the thumb on the G and using that as a reference, and then obviously I don't have to hold the hand shape down.
So there you're thinking semi-chromatic hand shape,
exactly.
Thumb on G, and
So we got like...
Yeah. That's really interesting. And are you thinking about that all over the bass? Then are you kind of thinking blocks of notes or of positions? I'm moving to the next position. I'm moving to the next position, rather than note by note by note by note.
Yeah, I'd say that that's a pretty large part of my idea around left hand technique. So like when I'm shifting anywhere, really, I'm thinking about the hand shape that I'm shifting to. Which also means that if I want to move within that position, I've got the hand already readily available, so I'm not wearing myself out by jumping around so much.
Cool. Well, lastly, it's on a personal note, I've been really excited to hear you play my bass, because one of the great joys about doing Discover Double Bass is many of the artists end up playing my instrument, and it's really exciting to hear you play it, because you are bringing a completely different sound to the instrument. And I just wondered how you get comfortable, because presenting a course like this is fairly intensive, and we're filming and people will be watching back, and you just play with such confidence and clarity, and it took you no time at all to become comfortable on the instrument. Do you have any tips for people playing on borrowed instruments?
Yeah, so that's actually such a big part of being a bass player, isn't it? Traveling around, playing on different instruments. And like I was saying to you before when we were discussing, in Germany, you have to play on a 5-string in orchestra.
Yes.
So you get used to every week, every orchestra you play with, getting a different instrument. So one of my exercises that I'll talk you through in the course is about that. And it's the first thing I do is just really slowly going through every hand shape on the instrument and rotating up each string so that I have a really clear map of exactly.
What do you mean by rotating?
So instead of shifting everywhere, which can get a little bit muddy and a little bit confusing.
So you're thinking about almost, like a pivot or a rotation, Yeah,
so a lot of my technique and what I'll talk about is how to shift without creating, without messing up the sound, so keeping a legato bow and shifting in a way that doesn't interrupt the line. So when I say rotating, it's almost like a pianist doesn't just kind of jump up and down the fingerboard. Instead, they glide across and almost rotate the hand to get a really smooth sound. And it's the same thing on the bass. So we're maintaining a really strong hand shape and then focusing more on the rotation of the arm weight to shift.
Well, it's been fascinating to see you play and get so comfortable. And of course, we've got orchestral string or tuning on at the moment. We've got the bel cantos on. Do you prefer playing in solo tuning? Because we also started the week with a set of solo strings, and it's the first time I've heard the bel canto solos, and they just sound great straight out of the packet. They really did sound fantastic. And which do you prefer playing, or what do you have on your basses at home?
So I really prefer playing on solo strings.
Yeah.
But it's a completely different thing, of course. And that is one of the great things about bel canto strings is that they do adjust so quickly. We just took these out of the packet and then started filming about 10 minutes after I started warming up on the bass.
Really did, yeah.
But I guess solo strings are just so fun to play on because they're so brilliant and bright. But it's definitely a lot more rewarding playing spiccato and excerpts on the orchestra strings. So I'm a little bit undecided.
Cool. Well, it's been fantastic hearing you play both, and on behalf of everyone here and the audience at home, thanks so much for joining me. And just before we wrap up the conversation, where can people go to find out more about you, Phoebe? Where can people find you online and maybe hear some of your music?
So I'm a fairly big poster on my Instagram account.
Yes.
I got a Facebook page. I have a YouTube channel. I haven't yet got around to doing the website, but I feel like in today's day and age, Instagram basically is that. So I got links there to a lot of different things.
We'll provide some links below. And there's also, you showed me briefly yesterday, a really charming video of you playing outside with one of your work colleagues in the bass section of the QSO. Is it Over the Fence? Thing. So I'll maybe share. That's one of my favourite videos that I've seen recently.
That was actually really cool because we were in lockdown and we weren't able to visit anyone in the orchestra. We couldn't really hang out with our friends. Like everyone here has definitely experienced. And we started this little thing where we could have a musician come and meet us on the other side of our fence outside our house and play with each other. And it was, the neighbours actually loved it because we had all the neighbours in our street come out of their houses and listen to what we were doing. I'm glad you enjoyed that video.
Yeah, it was absolutely superb. So, on behalf of everyone here, thanks so much for joining me. And everyone watching at home, thank you. Please go and check out Phoebe's course. It's got some incredible lessons. And if you're a classical bass player particularly, I'm sure that you will enjoy it. But really anyone who wants to take a deep dive into left-hand technique, there'll be something there for you. So thanks for watching and we'll see you next time.